Hello everyone, welcome to a Second Thoughts overview of Rakarth of the Dark Elves. So I played through the initial turns, have some conclusions on this faction. As always, in the end I'll give you some of the typical armies that I would try to maximize variety and to try different compositions for a bit of fun. And without further ado, let's play with Rakarth of the Dark Elves. So for your short victory, you need to win the Whip of Agony quest battles. It was one of your quest battles basically, to maintain control of the Turtle Isles. That's the first province that you actually get. It's where you start. And to occupy, loot, raise or sack 30 different settlements. So all in all, very cool short victories. It allows you quite a lot of flexibility of where to go towards. Very sandbox feel for it. Like you could go anywhere after this, really. So the reward is +3 recruit rank to all your units, which is great to ensure you do get some nice upgraded units right as you get them. Now for the long victory changes things. You need to achieve the short victory conditions, to occupy, loot, raise or sack 75 different settlements, to control the Shrine of Cain. Yeah, it's pretty far away. And to destroy all of the major High Elf factions. Now this includes Nagorith, which is further to the north. Sometimes they're destroyed already, sometimes they're not. So if they manage a foothold, you have to deal with them. The Order of Lore Masters located here, down south. And also the Knights of Calador, Imbric, located here. So pretty much it's really difficult because it's a monumental task. Unless you have the fortune that all of them are destroyed by someone else, and which is difficult, then you'll have to do it yourself. So you'll have to expand onto Ulthuan. It's going to be a bit of a pain, you know. Most likely you'll need to go over Lustria before getting there. So yeah, it's kind of like a difficult one. And you still need to maintain control of Eataine here. Now, achieving this, you gain 15% income from slaves. Now, the slave economy has been improved, so it is a great bonus. However, it may show up too late to have that much of an impact. Why? Because it's not unfeasible that you're even going to occupy, loot, raise and sack 272 different settlements, so the domination victory before that point in time. Okay? So Rakarth, he's under the lash, basically. He has access to the most depends mechanics, more on that later. His forces do not receive vigor penalties from raiding stands. This is better than it looks like, by the way. I'll speak a little bit later about this in the army stances, okay? And then he has minus 10% upkeep for all monsters units into all armies. So a very thematic idea here. Of course, you're going to be fielding lots of monsters in your armies for certain. Now, the best thing about him, climate. Look at this, all green, baby. That's exactly what you want to see. Well, not all green, but he has some interesting ones because he actually has Chaos Wasteland as green. So definitely if you wish to go for that domination or world map conquest, he's a good one. Even though he has yellow, you know, unpleasant in the mountains, it's still pretty cool because you can dominate, you know, for the most part all the new world, then just jump down into the Empire lands and into the mountains, of course. And, you know, unpleasant, it's fine. It's the uninhabitable that pretty much creates issues, and it's all just this pocket here. It's pretty far away from your initial location and the typical expansions. So yeah, I like this one for full domination. Definitely one that I would advise if you want to go for map completion. It will be for Rakarth with the Dark Elves. Starting location is very good, very defensive with a 4-settlement province. It always helps. It allows you either to expand into Lustria or just use the sea lanes and go elsewhere. You also have access to the sea, so all the sea goodies, of course, that can adjust your income, that can help out your income, are really good. Now, typical expansion would, of course, be to control all of Lustria, later into Ulthuan for the long victory. But the fact that you have the sea lanes so close by means you have a lot more options available, and this makes it a nice replay value. Like, you may go into the southern lands, you may go over here, you may wish to go over to the desert. It's really up to you. Just remember that long campaign victory, of course, with High Elves, which is kind of like the pain, but you can have your own objectives, of course, by the way. So diplomatically you're part of the evil tide, really, and surrounded by mainly lizardmen, dwarves, some monogods. Likely they'll all be your enemies. Now, there's still some choices in terms of greenskins, minor ones actually, and even Zinch, actually, because when you see it, they only have -10 aversion. This is definitely a possibility, and especially you're going to be fighting their enemies, so who knows, you can ally with Kairos. That would be an interesting, let's see if he's trustworthy. So still, just to give it a little bit of an idea, theory crafting in this case. I know that the greenskins can, because I advanced a little bit and I was managing, but you know, some greenskins monsters infantry, their artillery units, and of course from Zinj either their infantry or flyers specifically. That would be a nice idea, or maybe those flamers. Yeah, would make up for a deadly combination. So yeah, by all means try it. It should be an interesting campaign to try and get some alliances with them nevertheless. So yeah, that's the sort of idea. Anything else? For the most part you're going to be fighting high elves and lizardmen and border stuff, so anything really from that dislikes them, maybe even Vampire Coast, will be a good idea. In terms of mechanics, slaves, it's a currency of sorts. It was modified. Now it generates globally income and has some nice buffs if you increase the number of slaves really well. So they are used for many things. For instance, they are used in dictats. So these are kind of like edicts, you know, you just generate for that province 1,500 for the treasury at the cost of 400 slaves. Or you can have 50 growth for 5 turns at the cost of 300 slaves. Or you can have +10 control at the cost of 200. Actually, because that province is going now, I'm going to use it, and as you can see, it locks the other ones for the duration, which is 5 turns. So yeah, that's cool. You can also use them for rights, basically. So 800 for the Black Ark one. Basically, this will allow you, of course, a Black Ark, which is a mobile recruitment platform. It's kind of like a horde faction at sea, really. So it provides recruitment, replenishment, and you have bombardment abilities for armies that are in your range. So staying close to them actually gives you an edge in the battles that are happening inland. Now you also have the sacrifice to authority, so your lords do have loyalty, so you have to be careful. Loyalty is very simple. If it reaches 1, or actually if it reaches 0, they will revolt and they'll take that army with them, so make sure that it happen. And then of course you can get some control. Then you have the convocation of hunters. This doesn't cost any slaves. It will give you a dilemma that will allow the dispatch of hunters to secure additional units for a monster pen. So this is free, but then your choices may incur additional costs. So basically you're going to send out some hunters anywhere and see if they can recruit some monsters for your monster pens. And of course you have the sacrifice to Cain, casualties capture, the income from post-battle loot, casualty replenishment rate. It's always nice, especially the casualty replenishment rate is really cool to ensure that maybe you've been around a couple of battles or you had a very Pyrrhic victory or something like that. Then you can quickly replenish back to health. And you also have this army ability, the Dark Conduit, so it's an explosion. It's really cool. So yep, basically these are what you have in terms of rights. I already spoke about the lords, already spoke concerning the Black Arks as well. You're also one of the few factions that can actually build up the Shrine of Cain and of course claim the sword, but by the time that you reach it, almost likely someone already built it up, and what you need to do is to actually destroy the Lord. I wish that you couldn't take over the sword just like that, because then it would imply that only really the High Elves, Dark Elves, and Wood Elves can actually build the shrine. But oh well, that's how it works. Now, one of the other mechanics, let me show you with the links here, is the Names of Power. Now, Names of Power, upon reaching level 10, you can choose a name of power that will increase either combat skill or the army or the campaign stuff, you know, the faction as a whole. And I'll have the screen with all of those effects later on, but it's really such a powerful one because this allows you to have, you know, drastic implications for the Lord and the army composition as well as overall play style, and of course this helps out into having a little bit more variety, which is excellent. Now finally, in terms of the specifics of Rakarth, what he does is very simple. He has a mechanic called the Monster Pen. What this means is that every time that he fights, he gets a chance to getting units for these Okay, and the units that you have available depend on which grounds you're fighting. So if you're in the jungle, you'll obtain some specific ones for the jungle, you know, such as the Carnosaur, for instance, or maybe you can get some Stegodons, you know. But that's basically it. You can get, you know, very cool units depending where you're actually fighting. Okay, and then of course you can recruit them. That's how I actually recruited the Pharaoh Carnosaur and these Harpies even. So I don't start with those and didn't build anything to build them. So all that I did was actually fight a couple of battles and I managed to obtain them. So this happens to all the armies, which is great. And then of course, by all means, it will give you a great variety in terms of the army compositions, of course. I cannot wait for Rakarth to be nearly only monsters, which is so fun. So yeah, that's the sort of mechanics that are set here for Rakarth. One additional mechanic that I was almost forgetting. You can now use slaves to instantly construct a building. So if instead of waiting for the turns, you can also choose to instant build, you know, and cost some slaves. But this is great. It allows you to, you know, grow really fast and build up really fast. And it kind of works really well, if it not because you quite use the black arcs for most of the time for the recruitment. So yeah, I guess I like it still. It's a nice option to have, especially when you still don't have, you know, black arcs. Like beginning, you don't have those. So in terms of province edicts, you have a rush construction slave cost minus 10% growth. Then you have a defensive one. Enemy hero action success reduced, ambush success chance increased, and the chance of intercepting an army using the underway beast path to world routes increased. Pretty helpful, especially with the Skaven, with the greenskins, with of course with the armies that we will go for this, but of course with the enemy hero action success chance, it's always helpful, especially if you're being swarmed by them. Then we have income from post-battle loot faction wide, which is excellent. So this means that you can, if you're going to, you can micromanage this. So then if you're about to engage in like 5-6 battles, just pop this in every single one of your provinces. Then on the next turn, of course, you need to wait a turn. Next turn, you fight all those battles, and of course, you gain a lot more income, and then you go back into this. So it's really well worth it if you can plan it out. Never forget that you have this option, because come on, like it's 5%, it accumulates. So let's say that you get 5 provinces doing this, it's already 25% more from post-battle. Then we have income from bold buildings and also a control edict. In terms of army stances, this is typically a tricky part. So you have Winds of Magic, and this is what allows you enable replenishment. So the channeling is what allows you to replenish in foreign territory at a cost of 10% movement. This basically is what allows you to replenish, but of course it doesn't have immunity to attrition, which is a problem. Then on the raiding, you do have the immunity to attrition, but you don't have replenishment, and this is costly because this implies that they don't have in camp, so they can never have an immunity to attrition and replenishment at the same time, particularly difficult in uninhabitable terrain. Luckily, Rakarth is much better for it, and especially because his raiding stance does not have a vigor penalty, which is typically a very important one, because of course your units, you know, won't act well without vigor. So yeah, that's cool. And also you have a chance to add units to the monster pens. Of course, units depend on the local climate as always. Then we have ambush for 25% movement, and of course the force march, typical ones there. So in terms of buildings, there's only a resource building really in the Great Turtle Isle that allows income, reduced upkeep, recruitment, and a little bit more rank for Harpies, War Hydra, Charybdis, and Black Dragons. So very helpful, especially because of course your overall theme with going with the monster units. Now military requires 7 buildings. And the tricky issue is that 3 can actually be built in minor settlements, but of course not the most 1. Well, you can build it, but only for Harpies and Scourge Rider Chariots. Now, tier 3 units are already very good, and especially with the addition that you have those monsters pens, it's really possible for you to do just good armies with only tier 3 units, especially ranged units, you know, and fast cavalry and infantry, which is always great, you know, particularly with the Witch Elves, they're very fast. That's the sort of idea. Very mobile, very dangerous force to deal with. Then we have the infrastructure. So we have growth and casualty replenishment rate. With more slaves, over 23, you also have some diminishment in slaves per ton and even more growth. So it's helpful. It was tweaked, and right now it's much better, much better. And now we have also an income building, which gives a lot of building over 53 slaves, which is great, and it also reduces the slave count, but it's more manageable. Then we have the arena as well, giving control and reducing the number of slaves. Or we have less control but more slaves used, reduction on the slaves used by buildings and the slave costs. So you can reduce this quite significantly, which is great. And then in addition we have a campaign movement range, income from territories, income from all buildings, and income from slaves in the local region. Pretty much a very good building of overall nice choices. These were changed recently, which made the whole campaign much better in terms of the slave mechanic. Then we have a great research tree. This is really powerful. Tons of buffs to campaign, to the units, and it is recommended to kind of check it out initially to see what you need. Okay, it will tell you what the necessary additional technologies are, but these are mainly these three. So with these three you get access to this one. So basically, in order to get to quickly over them, you need to do this, upgrade 1, this, upgrade 2, this, upgrade 3, and this, and then you can start checking in for the ones for the monsters, which is kind of an idea that you may follow, especially for Rakarth, because he does buff them. So that's the sort of thought process that I want you to have. And nevertheless, nothing bothering you to go, nothing wrong with going with these ones, initially, of course. These also focus on important aspects, such as income from sacking settlements, for instance, or even for more melee for harpies and armor-piercing weapon damage for harpies. So yeah, all good changes overall. Your units in the end will be much more powerful, so yeah. As always, for your lords, you have your lord-specific skills or legendary lord specifics. You have the magic or melee line. In this case, Rakarth does not have magic, so he has the melee line. Then we have the red line or army, and then we have the blue line or campaign. Now, starting with the blue line, it does have an increase in casualties captured post-battle. This is important because, of course, you gain a lot from the slaves, as you've seen. So, by all means, that's a cool one to have. You can go into lightning strike, and you can also have, this wonderful casualty replenishment rate with reduced casualties from attrition. Not as important with Rakarth because he doesn't have too many ill climates, but yeah, still have upkeep reduction, which I always like, and then you still have even more upkeep reduction. In case you wish to go into the bloodline, there's some good options there. In terms of the red line, it's rather average to expensive, mostly because you have some elite units split up from the other units, such as the infantry, for instance, and that can create some issues, and especially in terms of, for instance, cavalry, which is also split up. I wish it wasn't. It would allow much better, but still. Then you have some Beastmasters Lords. This is important, especially for this campaign, because you do have some nice improvements to most of the beasts, to the most beasts. So you can do a lot of damage with these Beastmaster Lords, and I think they're very thematic. They're excellent to build up. And of course, then you have all the schools of magic. Most of them focused on damage. It's overall the whole force of the Dark Elves is to cause a lot of damage. Their main force is being glass cannons. That's the idea. So here we have the list of names of power. So they can have a tremendous change for the army composition that you go for, of course, and definitely these can also affect the fact that you have some monsters in your armies, which is always great. So by all means, just be wary of how much this change. Sometimes you'll be building up a sort of army with the Lord, and then suddenly he gets like revered, or that he gets the Grim Gaze or the Fang Shield, and then you go, okay, maybe I should go into the Black Gods. That sort of idea, that's something that you need to keep an eye out for. So the red line skills, they are, as spoken before, they're quite average to expensive. It's difficult getting good combinations for the late game without spending too many red line skills, as you can imagine. What to see. For Rakarth, it's not as important because of his focus on monsters, which are mainly over here on the Lash Master. But still, there's some combinations here and there. So let me show you. So Rakarth, a note here. You can always change these armies and include some of the other monsters. But they are in accordance to climate, and that implies that you may not obtain them during a campaign. I did not include those options here. But yeah, mammoths are cool to have with it, of course. So he gives nice buffs to harpies, to the point that they can actually act as infantry, really, and all the monsters, of course, can come in closer and finish the job. Of course, you'll have tons of micromanagement to do with all those breath attacks, you know. This here is already 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. He has another one, so 8. Can you imagine 8 breath attacks that you need to take care of? But of course they're well worth it. All of that will give out a tremendous amount of damage. Then I have some combinations, you know, either with the Cold War Knights, of course, because they do have the stalk. You can imagine how effective they can be if you know how to use it, of course. But nothing wrong with going, you know, just typical dark shards and some infantry units with tons of monsters to support. Nothing wrong with that, really. Then we have some other combinations, of course, nothing too fancy here. All the units that you're already typical to use. I've shown these army compositions many times, including this. This is basically a tier 3 unit only army composition, just to ensure that you have some sweeper armies that you can maybe, you know, use this to go on the seas, you know, and collect all the treasures, and they'll act really well. They'll behave really well. So then, of course, you can have some different combinations using shades and some infantry, some monsters, of course, probably focusing more on the monsters because of that cost. And finally, the Beastmasters. I would use plenty of Beastmasters in the campaign because of how many buffs they can give to the monsters themselves. And of course, you know, just having some sisters, because they are buffed by the same skill. Just getting some sisters to hold the line while you get the time to position these guys for a better breath attack. You know, that's the sort of idea. And just having some manticores to control the skies while the dragons are at it. So that sort of idea always works well. Of course, these are just, you know, my ideas. You can change anything. You can change the typical heroes. I always advise to have at least a lord, a melee lord, or a melee hero and a caster hero in all armies. But then, of course, you could have different choices of them. That's up to you. So Rakarth not only has a specific playstyle, but has much better climate options, implying he's a perfect lord to try and dominate the whole map with. His starting position gives him unique enemies to face up against, and even have the possibility of allying with some factions that are not likely with anyone else. That alone adds some replay value to this campaign. Now, focusing on the beasts, of course, implies a great variety of armies that you can embrace, and of course you can always go with the typical ones as I've shown, but add a couple of those units over there as for good measure. Now, your army consists of, for the most part, of course, great infantry, great missiles, great cavalry, great single entities, good flyers, armored piercing emphasis. They do like some health, and you like some range. Replenishment is great, especially because of the climate changes, so go for it. It's really a nice campaign without having too much to worry in terms of replenishment. So time to control Jurassic Park properly with Rakarth of the Dark Elves.